Welcome to the future, where the glass is half full and you'll need new glasses, where you'll be jumping from conclusions.
The past is annulled, and a new future is born.
Never before in history has so much meant so little to so many. AD on the radio.
Have you ever had one of those moments where you could say, I was there when? You ever been there in person when something of historical significance is unfolding in front of your eyes, and you know that not only are you seeing something that's historic, but also this is a story that you're going to be able to tell for the rest of your life? You ever had one of those? See, I didn't until this one magical weekend. And you might have been around, you might have been listening to the show at the time a couple years back. You might have remembered me talking about this, but there was this one weekend, and for all sorts of reasons that I won't bore you with right now, I was having a really rough time of it. Like, it was one of those instances, and we've all had it. I'm not special, I'm not complaining, but we've all had it, where life just seems to be beating on you and beating on you and beating on you unrelentingly. And I had that month. It wouldn't let up. Unrelenting. But I had this one incredible weekend. One of the best weekends of my life, containing one of the best days of my life. And the sequence of events went like this. On a Thursday, I think, Jim Breuer, do you remember that interview when he came on the show? Man, he was so great. Jim Breuer came on the show, and it was one of the greatest moments of my broadcasting career, because for years, I'd been listening to Jim Breuer on Howard Stern. Since I was a kid, I'd been listening to Breuer on Stern and loving every second of it and wishing I could be a part of that conversation. And then, man, I got to sort of fulfill a childhood goal that I had before I'd even been on the radio. I got to have Jim Breuer on my show, and it was every bit as good as I imagined it would have been the whole time I'd been listening to him growing up. That was awesome. And then I was in California at the time. The next night, Jim Breuer was playing a show. Went and saw him do comedy. It was brilliant, absolutely incredible. And part of the reason why he was in town was because the New York Mets were playing that night, or that following day, rather. And, well, it was amazing. I'd done an incredible interview with him. He was hilarious doing stand-up. And in town was the Seven Line Army. This, if you're not familiar with it, and if you're not a Mets fan, there's a very good chance you're not. But it's a group of Mets fans that travel around the country. And so, go see Breuer absolutely kill doing stand-up. And he'd made me laugh. And he'd given great life advice on the show. And it was followed up by more laughter and more talk about the New York Mets. One of the things that keeps me going. In front of a crowd full of other Mets fans. It was great. It was a magical, amazing thing. And then the next day, we all marched through the streets of San Diego and went to see our New York Mets take on the San Diego Padres. And it was a beautiful, amazing game. Beautiful, amazing day at one of the most beautiful ballparks in America. Maybe the most beautiful ballpark in America. I've heard a lot of people say that. Petco Park. If you get a chance to go see a ball game there, man, it's a magical thing. There's not a bad seat in the entire house. And you got that beautiful San Diego sea breeze. It's good stuff. And not only that, the Mets won, but that thing that I was able to say I was there when for was Big Sexy, Bartolo Colon, who was at the time on the Mets pitching staff. He hit his first and only career home run at that game. And I was there when. And I don't know if you've ever been able to watch something like that happen as it unfolds in front of your eyes, but it almost happens in slow motion because, look, Bartolo Colon, Big Sexy, his at-bats were the stuff of legend. It would not have been uncommon for him to have fallen over with his helmet off. He was a guy who, after years of just not bothering to swing, started swinging. And mostly he did it for comedic effect. So we all love watching Bartolo Colon bat. But at this instance, he hit the ball. And no one could believe it. We heard the sound. And then we saw it travel. And then we saw the ball continue to travel. And we saw it go over the fence, back, gone over the left field fence. And in the time that the ball left the bat, I think we all had the same realization. It happened in slow motion. Oh my gosh, Bart got a hit. Oh my gosh, this hit is going to be a real hit. Oh my gosh, this hit is going over the fence. This is going to be a home run. This is Bartolo Colon's only ever career home run. We are here watching the only home run that this absolute legend has ever hit and maybe ever will hit. It all occurs in slow motion to you, and you feel like you're living through something at a reduced speed when you're living through history. But you know what? We're all living through history right now. Based on what happened today, we are definitely living through history, which is maybe why today feels like it's been moving in slow-mo. What exactly are we talking about? I'm sure you know, but if not, we'll get into it next.
Real radio.
104.1.
Where the left and right come together for fundamental truths. AD on the radio, on Twitter at ADSXE.
So, you know, if you listen to this show on 950 AM KPRC in Houston, Texas, there's a very good chance that you know and you love Ramon Robles Jr. To know Ramon is to love Ramon, one of the greatest human beings anybody could ever hope to be acquainted with. Producer of talk radio and some of the best barbecue you have ever had in your life. But Ramon, who also happens to be, and I don't think he'd mind me saying this, a somewhat staunch conservative, in the run-up to the election, right around the time Donald Trump was just about to secure the nomination, he summed it up perfectly. He put into words perfectly how I think a lot of people felt about Donald Trump at the time and continue to feel about Donald Trump at the time on the Republican or conservative or whatever the hell you want to call it side of the aisle. He said, you know, I love some of the things that Donald Trump says. I just wish it wasn't him saying them. Meaning, gosh, ideas like making it easier for American entrepreneurs to start, run, maintain, and be successful at businesses by lowering corporate tax rates and things of that nature. I'm all in favor of. I'm all in favor of buying American, selling American whenever possible. I think we need better security at the border. I think we need a way of letting in people so that America continues to be a melting pot, a country of celebrated differences, and a country of diversity, but we need to do so in an orderly way. Basically, hey, we need to have a wall, but there needs to be a big, beautiful door in it. All these things, when you take Donald Trump out of the equation, start to sound a bit more reasonable, don't they? Hey, we need to have increased border security, but we need to make sure that we are continuing to let people in that are going to add something to our country, because that's what made our country great in the first place. That was the idea. Wall, big, beautiful door. Take Donald Trump out of the equation, sounds significantly more sensible. We need to lower the corporate tax rate. America has the highest corporate tax rate in the world. That's why Burger King is buying Canadian donut chains so they can headquarter themselves in a country where there's lower corporate taxes. We need to give American companies a fighting chance to provide jobs, to have the extra cash necessary to innovate, and in that way, make America great again. Again, when you take someone like Donald Trump out of the equation, when people don't immediately go, you're just doing yourself a favor because you're a corporate businessman and you're doing your buddies corporate businessman type favors because you know that when you're done being president, you're got to get reciprocity. When you take Donald Trump out of the picture, it sounds a lot more sensible. When you say it would be great to buy American and sell American, it sounds more sensible. When you're not going, hold on a second. Is he giving a sweetheart of a business incentive to American Steel because, well, he uses American Steel to build all of his buildings and there's going to be a kickback or an upside on this one for him? When you remove the guy from the conversation, a lot of the things that he talks about are a little bit more easy to take seriously. And I'm thinking that was what Ramon was making reference to when he talked about being all in favor of the things that Donald Trump was saying, but just wishing somebody else would say them. Like I said, I don't think I'm that far off the mark, and I don't think that Ramon would mind me saying these things. Now, if you're like me, you're of the opinion, and I guess I'm a little bit more anarchic than the Ramones of this world. If you're like me, you're of the opinion that there's little to no difference between the two parties. Democrat, Republican, it's all the same thing. It's Coke or Pepsi. It's not that different. It's brown sugary water that you probably shouldn't consume too much of. Here's the thing. Do you remember a little while back, we actually played this game of multiple guests on this show? Had a staunch liberal, the liberalist of liberals, and the most Republican of Republicans, and played this multiple choice game with them. And it was a game of Bush or Obama. And I just shouted out stuff that either president had done and said, who did it? Who's responsible for that one? And nobody got them all right, and all of them were surprised at the end of it to go, wait a second, that's my guy? I didn't think that was my guy. Oh, man. Like I said, it's all sort of much of a muchness to me, politicians. But I did find myself agreeing with Ramon. In terms of thinking, hey, it would be great. It would be great if it was easier for business to get done in America, whether that was massive business, whether that was somebody trying to start a business out of their kitchen. Either way, it would be fantastic if the game was set up to win. And if that involved lowering corporate taxes so people could get ahead, well, then by all means, that sounds great. It would be great if we let people into the country in a more thoughtful and measured way. It would be fantastic if there were times when people who had done the right things and jumped through all the right hoops and made all the right applications had their actions, like many of my friends have done. You work in San Diego often enough, and you're going to wind up with friends that were born in TJ that went about coming into America in the legal, proper, and above board ways. And when there's people that bend or break the rules, well, it just makes their life harder, and that's not fair. And you want to see the right thing happen to the right person in these situations. But while all this stuff made perfect sense, the mouth it was coming from gave everybody cause for pause, and that went way deeper than anyone could have imagined, if what happened today is true. There's been all this talk of a coup, and I thought it was sort of tinfoil hat stuff. Now, I'm not so sure.
For more stimulation and less irritation, 9 out of 10 doctors choose KPRC AM 950, Houston's more stimulating talk radio.
Don't get the blues, get all the news. We mean all of you guys out there in Radioland. All aboard!
He's back. AD on the radio.
Give it up, yeah. Give it up, yeah. Bring this on, come on, come on.
So like we started the show by saying, you are living through historically significant times, my friend. Up until I saw Bartolo Colon hit that home run when the Mets took on the San Diego Padres, I'd never had one of those I was there when moments. Never had one of those things where it unfolded in front of you in slow motion and you realize history had been made as it was happening. It was pretty cool. But now we've all got one of those because we are living in the year 2018. We are living in the year where, well, the game is just indescribably different from anything we've ever experienced in our lives or anyone else's life for that matter. This is the year. These are the years that history students will write essays about moving forward. And, well, I would have told the people that told me back when Trump first became president that there was a coup happening in Trump's own party, that they needed to, that they probably had their tinfoil hat on a little too tight. So many people came up to me like, AD, you realize there's a coup right now, right? There's an insidious coup trying to usurp power in a treasonous way. And a lot of people that were saying this were sort of referring to the fact that a lot of Democrats were like, that guy's not my president. I didn't vote for him. Hashtag not my president. Well, he's president of the United States of America, whether you voted for him or not. Historically, this has always been the case. Someone's going to get elected that somebody else didn't vote for. They're still your president, was my attitude. And then there was a whole attitude of, well, you think that this is a coup because of the Never Trump Republicans? A lot of people on the right that were like, hey, man, this is horrible news. I'm a never Trumper. Well, guess what? Trump already happened, so the whole never part is not that. Anyways, people would come up to me and say, AD, there's a coup happening. There is a coup. It's insidious. It's media driven. It is driven from the inside out. But there is a coup. Make no mistake about it. And I was like, okay, like I said, you got your tinfoil hat on a little too tight. But based on what happened today, I don't know. I have to consult the dictionary and look up coup again. But this is an interesting one. Like I said, we're living through historically significant times. The New York Times published an essay that they said was written by a senior official in the Trump administration, supporting a central claim in Bob Woodward's book, supporting the claim that members of the president's staff are actively working against him. Like I said, maybe I have to re-examine the definition of the word coup. And I know that's a full overthrow of power, but it's, well, very interesting. This idea that members of the president's staff are actively working to subvert him. Now, this unnamed official painted a portrait of a divided White House because of Donald Trump himself. You know, the way Ramon and I were talking about it? Gosh, I like some of the things he says. I just wish somebody else was saying it. Because there's all these sensible things. Like we were talking about, there's all these sensible things that were part of the Trump campaign. That if you remove your misgivings about Donald Trump from them, seem to make pretty good sense. Hey, it would be awesome if we had a corporate tax rate that wasn't the highest in the world. It would make us more competitive. It would allow greater opportunities to businesses small and big. It would give people an opportunity to start their own business, to eventually achieve that American dream of saying to their boss, take this job and shove it, rather than trying to swim upstream when it came to just attempting to get off the ground and compete against larger businesses. It would be great if we allowed people into this country in a more thoughtful and measured way. If our border security was better, and if we were more accommodating to the folks that wanted to come in here, that had something to offer, that made a compelling case for their residence and ultimate citizenship in the United States. That idea of a wall with a big, beautiful door in it, that could have come from Obama. That could have come from anyone. Obama was the guy who was responsible for deporting more illegal immigrants than I think pretty much anyone else in the history of the United States presidency. So the idea of a wall with a big, beautiful door in it, you remove Trump from the equation, people on the left or the right would have rallied around that one, I think. The idea of making it easier for the small businessman to achieve. The idea of making large companies more competitive on a global scale. The idea of buying and selling American. A term that I think a lot of people call economic nationalism. And anytime you bring nationalist into anything, it doesn't have a good look to it, but that's sort of what it is. The idea of buying and selling American. The idea of making it easier for business people, small and large, to succeed in America, and the idea of securing our borders, but allowing in folks that are going to add something to this country who can make a compelling argument for their residency. That would be great. All the above. Doesn't matter which side of the political fence you fall down on. All these things are things that I think anyone could have gotten behind. But the fact that they were coming from Donald Trump made people uneasy. And with good reason, because there's many things that Donald Trump has done that have been beneath the office of the presidency, in my humble opinion, and in lots of other people's opinion. There's a couple of things that Donald Trump has done that have been downright scary. If you're like me, you found it to be downright scary when Donald Trump was tweeting Kim Jong-un saying, tell little rocket man, our nukes really work. I've got a bigger, better, more badass button ready to fry your asses. I mean, I paraphrase, of course, but we all remember the tweet. That made me antsy. That made me nervous. I was like, oh my gosh, can you imagine? Can you imagine if this was the attitude toward international Holocaust diplomacy that was taken around the time of the Cuban Missile Crisis? Can you imagine what it would have been like then? Well, you might not have a chance to imagine because none of us might be here. All this stuff is scary. All this stuff is worrisome. It doesn't matter which side of the fence you're on. And, well, that's been supported today by this New York Times article, this New York Times op-ed. The unnamed official, like I said, describes a White House that's divided because of the misgivings and concerns over the behavior of President Trump himself that his own staff have. Says here, this is a direct quote from the article, the dilemma, which he does not fully grasp, is that many of the senior officials in his own administration are working diligently from within to frustrate parts of his agenda and his worst inclinations. This is what the author of the piece wrote. Now, the Times provided an editorial to go with the essay. I mean, you publish something like this, you better be covering your ass in some way, shape, or form. But the Times said that it withheld the author's identity to protect the person's job, saying, we believe publishing this essay anonymously is the only way to deliver an important perspective to our readers. In Fear, Trump in the White House, Woodward's expose on Trump's presidency, and by the way, in case you've been wondering, that is the same Woodward of Woodward and Bernstein fame. He's the Watergate reporter. He's basically talking about a moment where former chief economic advisor Gary Cohn stole a letter off of Trump's desk before the president could sign it to keep him from terminating a trade agreement with South Korea. This is our tax dollars at work if this is true. He stole a letter off of his desk so it couldn't be signed. Where is it? I don't know. Have you seen it? I'm not sure. International diplomacy with South Korea. The book is also filled with interviews from officials expressing grave concerns about Trump's fitness for office. And whoever it was, and we know it's a guy because they refer to him as he, whoever it was that wrote the essay published by the Times, well, a lot of those claims are backed up. The essay said the root of the problem is the president's amorality. Anyone who works with him knows he is not moored to any discernible first principles that guide his decision-making. Although he was elected as a Republican, the president shows little affinity for ideals long espoused by conservatives, free minds, free markets, and free people. At best, he has invoked these ideals in scripted settings. At worst, he has attacked them outright. And you and I have talked about this before, but Donald Trump was a Democrat until about a second and a half before he decided to run. Bear in mind, if this is true, and I have to imagine that it is, if this is true, that this really did come from, that this essay was genuinely written by a member of Trump's staff, this is incredibly divisive stuff. Does this constitute a coup? Does it constitute treason? Or is it informing the public? I mean, here's the thing. You and I have talked about this a lot on the show. I think we deserve to know this stuff. I think we deserve to know things like this. I think that we too often forget. We too often lose sight of the fact that we're the ones signing the check. We, the people, who pay dearly out of our tax dollars every single month, we're the people whose taxes keep this whole shebang running. And there's going to be people that call it a coup. There's going to be people that call it treasonous. And I understand that. this coming from Donald Trump's own people is, well, definitely an effort to usurp his authority. It is definitely an effort to get him to not be around for that much longer. It is definitely an effort to take the president down. And I understand why people might call it treasonous. I understand why people might call it a coup. But at the same time, you, me, we pay these people. And government is this weird thing. It's the only instance I can think of where the people who cut the checks and pay the salaries are at the mercy of the people that we're paying. My boss calls me into her office. I'd better be there, and I'd better be there quick, smart. Why? Because she is my employer, and she is responsible for my livelihood, and therefore I respond accordingly. That's how it works. If your boss calls you into their office or wherever it is that they would want to talk to you, you would show up, and you would show up there at their pleasure. Politicians don't show up anywhere at our pleasure, and they absolutely should. So as much as it's weird and it's divisive and people are going to say it's a media plot and it's a coup and it's treason, it's all these things, I like to know stuff. I pay a massive amount of taxes. Many of the radio stations I'm on are in the state of California. You ever paid California taxes before? It'll make you a little freaking edgy. Holy crap. It will. Anyways, that's the situation. This is the historical time that we are living in. Now, Donald Trump and members of his staff have already spent a whole lot of the day trying to discredit Woodward's book. And when the Times op-ed dropped, they were in damage control again. So, what do we know? We know that we're living through crazy historic times. We know that we are living through a moment where openly and brazenly a member of the president's staff has, in an effort to either inform the American public or usurp the president's authority, maybe both, why not both? Put those hands together. Why do the two agendas have to be separate? We know that a member of the president's staff has openly and brazenly spoken out against them and the actions that they're trying to take. So there you go. If it feels like the world is moving in slow motion today, if it feels like history is unfolding in front of your eyes, if you feel like you are living through a time that people will ask you questions about in the future, that, my friend, is because you are. Oh, by the way, did you hear this interesting theory that's been floated out there that President Trump is President Trump because of Gwen Stefani? It holds a palpable amount of water.
You waiting to get washed away.
Now, more AD on the radio.
Back once again, the ill behavior, delivering and giving you my musical savior. Back once again, it's your boy AD again. Nobody rock a body better than me. Back once again, the ill behavior, delivering and giving you a musical savior. Back once again, it's your boy AD again.
This interesting new theory that's been floated out there that Donald Trump became president because of Gwen Stefani. Now, it sounds far-fetched, but stay with me on this one. I think there might be something to it. Now, you got to consider the source. And this is a man who is obviously one of Donald Trump and the Republican Party's most obvious and active detractors. That would be Michael Moore. Michael Moore has this theory about Gwen Stefani and how she played a role in Donald Trump becoming the president of the United States of America. How did the lead singer of No Doubt result in President Donald Trump? Well, this is the idea. he has suggested that Gwen Stefani is perhaps the most responsible person for Donald Trump's presidency. And he did this by putting this together. NBC was paying Gwen Stefani more to be on The Voice than Donald Trump was getting as the star of The Apprentice. Donald Trump was a star of The Apprentice. Gwen Stefani was one of several stars of The Voice, and she was getting more money than Trump, and that drove Trump crazy. This is the idea. So, Donald Trump staged his Trump Tower campaign announcement to prove to the network that he was worth more. He wanted to be recognized. And the idea was he'd been talking about running for president since 1988. This is well documented. He had, but he didn't really want to be the president. It was just sort of an interesting idea that managed to raise his public profile when he needed it raised. But the idea is that because of her making more money, he had a reason to say, oh yeah, I'm going to run for president. Who's worth more now, bitches? And I know that it sounds far-fetched, but Howard Stern's talked about this a lot too. Howard Stern, who's been friends with Donald Trump for years, I think in many ways knows Donald Trump as well as anybody else, said that, man, a nicer, more personable guest you could not have hoped to have met. That Donald Trump came on his show a bunch of times and was always great on his show. And that he was kind of a sweetheart. And he said that he didn't think Donald Trump wanted to be president and that Donald Trump wasn't doing well as president. Because he didn't want to be president. Howard Stern had a similar theory that he rolled out, saying every once in a while, NBC says, oh, ratings for The Apprentice are slipping. Looks like we might have to cancel it. Looks like you're going to have to take less money. Looks like you're going to have to be put in a diminished position. Now, a guy like Donald Trump, who had a massively successful show like The Apprentice, didn't want it to go away until he decided he wanted it to go away. He wanted to go out on top on his own terms. So every single time he needed a bit of leverage, whether he was renegotiating some sort of contract, whether he was in danger of getting canceled, whatever the case may be, he would float this idea of, I want to be president. I'm going to run for president. I'm thinking of running for president. For years and years, a lot of people said that Donald Trump should run for president. Some of Donald Trump's biggest detractors, you can find audio of them saying that they thought he would have made a great president back in the day. Folks like Henry Rollins. Henry Rollins was once on Howard Stern talking about how Donald Trump would have been a cool president. There's audio of all sorts of rappers, members of the hip-hop community, who loved and embraced Donald Trump. The aspirational nature of hip-hop ran comfortably alongside wanting to be like Donald Trump, aspiring to be a Donald Trump-esque type mogul. So hip-hop was very fond of Donald Trump. Now, that is not the case. But there's folks like Henry Rollins, there's folks like rappers, there's folks all over the place that when Donald Trump started trotting out the ridiculous idea of him being president, or at least an idea that most people condemned as being ridiculous back in the day, went, no, I don't know, I think he'd make a cool president. And Howard Stern said that basically Donald Trump just used the idea of politics as leverage to get what he wanted in the business world. And that it was a real surprise to him when it looked like people were actually going for it. And an even bigger surprise when they continued to go for it, and very uncomfortable for him when he became the president of these United States of America. Howard Stern, who has had Trump on his show numerous times, has said, I don't think he's doing well with this. I paraphrase, of course. But if there's a person that speaks from a position of intelligence, knowledge, and authority in terms of knowing Donald Trump and knowing Donald Trump for years, that would be Howard. And just like that, the idea that Gwen Stefani is responsible for who is president of the United States of America starts to make a scary amount of sense. I guess we live in a different and difficult age where if you're a person like Donald Trump, hell, maybe all of us, we got to be willing to have more than one career in a lifetime. Yeah, in the year 2018, Is it really that uncommon for you to have to change gears and do something different in the middle of your life? Not according to the great Wendy Liebman. It's not.
I love this job because of audiences like this. Also, I used to be a secretary, and I used to call in sick a lot. I said I had female problems, right? Like my boss didn't know I meant her. I was bored. I'd spend all day filing my nails. And I also had, after that job, after I quit and got fired, after that job, I drove a taxi for like a year, and I didn't pick people up or anything. I just really needed a car. Now I do comedy full-time. I'm also a writer. You know, I write checks. And they're actually mostly fiction. I love to write, like poetry and short stories. And when I was growing up, I had a pen pal. I wrote to her once a week for 14 years. So she wrote back. And she said, stop. I should, well, she sent me a telegram. It said, stop. But I should, it's my favorite joke. I should stop eating. I've been eating everything. So today, finally, I went running. I had to, you know, because the ice cream truck was going 60. I needed a lift to the bakery. So I'm at the bakery, right? And I'm standing in line, waiting my turn. This really cute guy was flirting with me. He finally came over, asked for my number. I gave it to him. And then I had to take a new one. And I thought...
Leave the stimulation to the professionals.
Everyone is so smart.
KPRC, more stimulating talk radio.
There's something happening here, and you should know what it is. The dumbing up of America. Now, more AD on the radio.
Dude, did you see this unbelievably strange exchange between Marco Rubio and Alex Jones? Marco Rubio had a back and forth, an interesting back and forth, which resulted in some pretty big talk with Alex Jones. He was having a press conference outside a Senate hearing today, and during the interview with a group of reporters, Alex Jones kept interrupting Rubio. He called him a little gangster thug. He called him a frat boy. He said he was part of a purge of conservatives that Rubio didn't have the guts to stand up against. It's just, hold on. It defies description. Let me just play this for you. But just bear in mind, this is Alex Jones busting in on Marco Rubio's press conference.
Republicans are acting like it isn't happening. Thank God Trump is.
Well, it's weird, man.
Oh, yeah, it's really weird. There's no purge of conservatives.
I don't know.
There's no shadow banning.
Who is this guy?
Are you concerned about bias in social media?
Yeah, who's this guy? We
Are you
deplatform.
concerned about bias in social media?
Well, I think the bigger bias is against freedom of expression. Everybody should be. There's a. Look, I support going
it's
after.
happening here, but you say I don't exist.
Is that a heckler or a press gaggle?
Look at this guy. He's saying that I don't exist, and they're deplatforming.
I just don't know who you are, man. I don't read weird websites.
Sure, and they demonize me in these very hearings, and then he plays dumb.
Here's the question.
Infowars.com, you know what it is.
Does Google, does Facebook, does
That's why you
Twitter,
get
do they
elected.
need to be regulated do they need to be regulated?
Marco Rubio, the snake. Little frat boy here.
All right, man.
Yeah.
Well, who are you, man?
Yeah,
Who's
sure.
this guy? I swear to God, I don't know
you better
who you
hope
are,
you
man.
deplatform me. Tens of millions of views.
InfoWars.
Bigger than Rush Limbaugh. He knows who InfoWars is.
But
Playing this joke over here. That's why the deplatforming didn't work.
But here's the question. Here's a question.
Hey, don't touch me again, man. I'm asking you not to touch me.
Well, sure, I just patted you nicely.
I know, but I don't want to be. I don't know
you
you,
want me to
man.
get
I don't know
arrested?
who you are.
It's not just good
You're not
to
going to get
First
arrested,
Amendment.
man. You're
It's
not going to get
just enough
arrested.
to
I'll
take my
take
First
care of it
Amendment.
myself.
Oh, big talk from Marco Rubio. I think we have to grab that as a soundbite and use it moving forward. We're not going to arrest you, man. I'll take care of you myself. This is the year that we live in. This is 2018. This is why, and feel free to join me on this one, because I'm guessing if you've listened to the show for this length of time that you are a normal, sensible individual that goes through life in a polite manner. But this is why I'm never going to drive that nice of a car, never live in that big of a house. There's no room for manners and sensible discourse in the year 2018. The only way you get ahead in the year 2018 is by ambushing press conferences and shouting at people. Ugh. Well, join me. Join me in the world of sensibility as we attempt to make some sort of plea for sanity in the year 2018. Let's you and I discuss the news, shall we? What's going on in the world? The FBI, did you see this? The FBI found Dorothy's ruby slippers from The Wizard of Oz after they'd been missing for 13 years. Yeah. I think the FBI actually had them the whole time. All they had to do was click their heels together and believe. Jimmy Fallon picked up a $1,136 tab for diners who left him alone. Yeah, just because they didn't bother him, didn't ask him for an autograph, didn't ask him for selfies, things of that nature. Jimmy Fallon picked up their $1,000 bill. Oh. I haven't really been all that interested in anything Fallon has done for the last couple of years. Can I have $1,000 too? No? No, all right. Harry Potter, hard to believe this. Harry Potter debuted 20 years ago. Yeah, Harry Potter debuted 20 years ago. And now look, J.K. Rowling is a billionaire, Daniel Radcliffe is a superstar, and Voldemort runs Amazon. They've all done really well. Colin Kaepernick is launching a clothing line. Did you see this? Colin Kaepernick is launching a clothing line. Right. Because, what says I have a problem with police brutality more than turning your cause into a blatant cash grab? The NFL regular season starts tomorrow night, as does excessive drinking by fans in Cleveland. John Kerry has gone on the record saying that he is not ruled out running for president in the year 2020. Are you a Kerry fan? Are you a Democrat? Would you be into him? If you had to pick one right now, Biden, Bernie, Kerry. If you're someone that's traditionally voted left, which one of those three are you into? John Kerry is a guy who, well, who he can count among his supporters? Dave Grohl. He might only have 2 supporters, but Dave Grohl is one of them. Or at least he was back in the day. Do you know that Dave Grohl actually campaigned for John Kerry? And do you know why he campaigned for John Kerry? It was because of that song, My Hero, legendary Foo Fighters song, which the George Bush campaign was using at the time. Like, Bush would come out at rallies and he would do so to the song My Hero. And Dave Grohl went, stop that. Please don't do that. For a couple different reasons. First and foremost, you didn't ask me permission. That's not cool. Second of all, that song's not for you. That song is about everyday people accomplishing amazing things. It's about the greatness that lies right beneath the surface of the everyday person, about ordinary people accomplishing extraordinary things. It's not for politicians. It's not for millionaires. It's not for you. Don't use it. But when the George Bush campaign started using My Hero, and Dave Grohl realized he was so diametrically opposed to everything that he felt George Bush was about, he started to look at his competition, and he actually really liked John Kerry and went out on the campaign trail with him, trying to help him get elected. But he was so disillusioned by the political process when he did this that he felt like, oh man, what's the point in any of this? And he wrote a lot of that album in your honor about that. That song, The Best of You, is about politics, about how you might be trying to do good in this world, and do good in this world. You might be trying to help others. You might be trying to serve the public, but it's almost impossible to do any of this because someone's always trying to get the best of you. Yeah, that's what that's all about. According to Bob Woodward's new book, a lawyer for President Trump warned Trump that if he did an interview with Robert Mueller, he'd wind up in an orange jumpsuit. Of course, that would be terrible for Trump, especially if it wasn't the same shade of orange as his spray tan. Did you see this? Until the 1960s, the most reliable pregnancy test was apparently injecting a woman's urine into a frog. If she was pregnant, her hormones would cause a fungus to grow on the frog's back. Fitting that they used a frog, because, when the guys who impregnated the woman found out, they about croaked. Actually, it's a weird segue. Speaking of frogs, did you hear about frog meat being called the superfood of the future? Frog meat's been considered to be an exotic food in the past. But the fact that it's cheaper, higher in protein, and lower in fat than chicken or beef has some scientists predicting that it's going to be available in restaurants and grocery stores everywhere soon. Have you ever eaten frog? I've never eaten frog, but I've always seen frog for sale at, I don't know, Cajun catfish festivals, where they're serving up frog legs as well as gator on a stick. I've had the gator, I've never had the frog. Apparently, frog tacos are absolutely delicious. Yeah, a couple buddies of mine have had frog meat tacos and said they're absolutely scrumdiddlyumptious. Frog meat tacos, you say? You know, I could be convinced to try frog meat tacos, but I gotta tell you, I'm drawing the line at eating the toadstada. You're welcome. Hey, you know, you try to not let it get to you. But if you're like everybody else that I've spoken to, especially this week, people on Facebook annoy you. People on Facebook might have even cost you friendships in the last 6 months to a year, especially. Here's the thing. You should never, A, let Facebook get to you, B, lose a friendship over Facebook. Because here's the thing. There's a very important reason why you shouldn't be taking Facebook seriously or even pay any attention to it. Why? Well, apparently, half of all Facebook users admit that they lie on Facebook. Yeah. So half of the time when people are saying stuff that grinds your gears on Facebook, it's not even true. Wow. It's crazy to think about. Half my friends are lying on Facebook? Jeez. I hope it's only about little stuff like relationships and politics and education, because I would hate to think that my friends' daily pictures of their delicious breakfasts aren't real. Ooh, did you hear which musician's concert was plagued by gun violence this past weekend just gone by over the Labor Day weekend? I hope that you had a great and safe Labor Day holiday, and I hope that nothing like this happened to you. A guy started randomly shooting outside a concert venue in California after he was told that he couldn't get into Ice Cube's show. Yeah, Ice Cube's show was sold out, so this guy started trying to shoot it up with a semi-automatic weapon, I believe. Crazy. Wow. You would think that after all this time, Ice Cube's fans would have learned to be a bit more, chill. Hey, did you hear about the crazy lengths that football teams are going to right now to steal each other's plays? If you're like me, you are more than ready for some football. It's exciting to have the sport back, I suppose. But it's a different game in the digital age. NFL teams have been forced to put tarps over their practice facilities to keep drones from stealing their plays. Yeah. Football teams are trying to steal each other's plays by using drones. I got to tell you, in a rare instance, the Cleveland Browns are actually ahead of the curve on this one, only because they came up with an even better way to stop people from stealing their plays years ago. It's called not having any, and it works great. Hey, so did you have a plan when you were graduating high school? Did you know what you wanted to do, where you wanted to go, what you wanted to become, the things that you were trying to do with your life? Because now, if you don't, it turns out public schools in several parts of America might not let you graduate. Yeah, public schools in parts of America have new policies where they won't let kids graduate unless they have a legitimate plan for the future. I got to tell you, I'm glad my school didn't have that, or this fall I'd be starting the 27th grade. Hey, did you hear about this guy who stole enough fruit recently to have it be considered grand theft? Yeah, felony grand theft of fruit. I guess it begs the obvious question, how much did he steal and of what sort of fruit? Well, it was a guy in California, and he was arrested recently after police found over 800 pounds of stolen lemons in his car. 800 pounds of stolen lemons in his car. More lemons than in your standard Fiat dealership. Yeah, apparently this guy had been stealing lemons for a very long time. He said that his plan to steal lemons was going great at first, but after the cops caught him, things turned, sour. So if you are single, if you're looking to hit the town and looking to mingle, make a love connection this coming weekend, possibly get a little bit of sweet loving, I have some bad news for you. There's now a better chance than ever before of you getting an itchy burning sensation in an intimate area if you hook up. Why? Well, apparently, there's been a 67% increase in gonorrhea in the U.S. Yeah, there's been a 67% increase in gonorrhea in the U.S. And I got to tell you, that's nothing to clap about. Do people just straight up not use condoms anymore? Like, condoms, pshaw. those were for our parents in the 80s, or those were for us in the 80s. Now we're just not going to be bothered. It's very strange. We are not doing the right things in this country in many ways. And practicing safe sex shouldn't be something we need a reminder of, but apparently it is. Yeah. 67% increase in gonorrhea in the United States of America. Gonorrhea. Perhaps we should, if we're going to continue being this stupid, start calling it here to stay area.